Welcome to massive open online course. For today's topic, it will be stages, process and enactment of budget under the broad topic of public finance in India. Budget is a very important item in any country. This is the picture of our finance minister present, or the current finance minister presenting the budget for the last financial year. For today's lecture, we will define what a budget is, go into the historical background, a small introduction of what it deals with, the different types of budgets that are presented all over the world, the components behind budget, the different stages and the process that happens in the enactment of budget. Finally, the enactment, and we will do a little bit of appraisal. The annual budget of a government. It is a public proclamation by any government. It actually projects the actual expenditure and the revenue of a nation. We can see the most important evidence of where the country's priorities are, whether the finances are for the poor, the marginalized or the rich, or it is for agricultural or industrial sector. The current budget processes do not involve much of the citizens' role, especially in India. Citizens literally do not have any understanding. It is also extremely complicated because of the financial strains that are involved, the technical aspect, and it is also sometimes called as the esoteric nature of the budget making. A little bit of background before we go into the actual budget process. The references to the word budget can be traced even in Kautilya's Arthasastra, where the chancellor or the country's ruler first is expected to estimate the amount of revenue that could be raised from the people or the public before we plan how to spend or where to spend the money. Origins of the modern term budget can be traced to the Norman period. The term budget is a French word, baguette, meaning a leather bag or a wallet. The first use of the term budget date back to the year 1773. Walpole, as the Prime Minister and Chancellor of the Exchequer, used this for his country's financial statement for the financial year. As part of the introduction, before we go into the process and stages of budget making, in India is supposed to be a federal nation where the economy of India plays a very important role in the development of the nation. The union budget is developed, enacted based on the provisions of Article 112 in the Indian Constitution, where the budget is presented in the Parliament by the Finance Minister. The budget is prepared by the Department of Economic Affairs of the Ministry of Finance. Budget is a money bill according to the Constitution of India under Article 110. Each state government is also expected to present their budget according to Article 202 to their respective legislative assemblies. Any budget is presented by the Finance Minister of India under Article 77, Clause 3. Usually, it is presented in the last working day in the month of February. The budget has to be passed by the Lok Sabha, and it is also presented to the Rajya Sabha, which has no voting power with regarding to budget. Usually, the budget comes into effect on the 1st April, which is the start of the financial year in terms of India, and usually it is between the 1st April and the 31st March every year in India, which is called as the fiscal year of India. Until 2016, that's for about 92 years, the budget for railways was presented separately in the Parliament. The last railway budget was presented on the 25th February 2016 by Mr. Suresh Prabhu, who was the then Minister for Railways. Since 2017, railway budget is merged with the union budget. In India, the budget presentation is always fixed by the President. Between the years 1999 and 2016, the general budget was presented at 11 a.m. on the last working day of February. Since 2017, Indian budget is presented on the 1st February every year. A small exception to be noted here, that if an election is fixed for that particular year, budget may be presented twice. With that introduction, we move on to the constitutional provisions that are there for the preparation and presentation of the budget. If you read Article 112 of the Indian Constitution, nowhere we see the word budget. The word that is used instead of budget is annual financial statement. The President, according to Article 112, is only responsible for presentation of budget to the Parliament. But by Article 77 Clause 3, the President usually delegates to the Union Finance Minister the responsibility of preparing and presenting the budget. What is a budget? Budget in India gives out an estimated income and expenditure for that particular year, that is, which has been already said, the 1st April to 31st March. The estimated expenditure in the budget is at two levels. The first one is called as the sums charged upon the Consolidated Fund of India, which means it is charged, it cannot be oated. The second one is the sum that is required to meet other expenditure out of the Consolidated Fund of India, which will only be oated by the Lok Sabha. These are the different types of budgets that has been presented all over the world: revenue budget, capital budget, supplementary budget, vote on account, zero based budget, performance budget and balance budget. Different countries follow different kinds of budgets to suit their economy. A budget usually is divided into a revenue budget and a capital budget. The revenue budget is also divided into revenue receipt and revenue expenditure. Capital budget is divided into capital receipt and capital expenditure. These are the components of the budget. On the left side you see the budget receipts, on the right side you see the budget expenditure. Under the budget receipts you have revenue receipts and capital receipts. The revenue receipts have tax receipts and the non-tax receipts. The capital receipts have recovery of loans and borrowing and other liabilities, including disinvestment. The budget expenditure on the right has two divisions, mainly the revenue expenditure and the capital expenditure. The revenue expenditure is further divided into plan expenditure and a non-plan expenditure, while the capital expenditure has plan expenditure and non-plan expenditure. When we come to the budget procedure or the process, the main highlights to be noted are: anybody who prepares a budget should not obscure fundamental issues of that particular nation. Budget usually ensures that no irresponsible decisions are taken by the executive. These procedures control the executive. The budget should be considered or seen as a whole, not as series of unrelated parts. Though there are multiple levels of division, it has to be seen as a whole. It also needs a complete and coordinated circuit between the expenditure and the resources of the nation. There is always a scope for a long-term economic planning and development for the nation. These are some of the highlights that has to be noted with regarding to the procedures. The budgetary process. The budget is prepared, enacted and executed. This is what we understand. Who prepares it? It is always prepared by the Ministry of Finance in consultation with Niti Aayog, which earlier was called as the Planning Commission, and other ministries and bureaucrats. The important or the nodal body is the budget division of the Department of Economic Affairs in the Finance Ministry. Normally, the budget making process starts in the month of August, September, which is the third quarter in terms of financial year. A circular is issued to all the ministries in the states and union territories, autonomous bodies, by the Finance Ministry, asking them to prepare the estimated amount that they require for their particular states. Circular comprises skeleton forms along with requisite guidelines based on which every ministry is supposed to present their demands to the Ministry of Finance, to the central government. Finance Minister also seeks the view of industry captains, economists prior to the preparation before he finally presents it to the final approval of the Prime Minister of India. Since 2003, we moved into a better management in terms of budget preparation. This was done through the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, FRBM Act, which was passed by the Indian Parliament in the year 2003, aiming for good governance, better budget management. In the FRBM Act, documents are tabled in the Parliament along with the budget. So, the procedure for budget or the process of preparation of budget is mentioned in the Indian Constitution from Articles 112 to 117. Rules 204 to 221 and 331E, Rules of Procedure and Conduct of Business in Lok Sabha, is also adopted in the process of budget making. Direction 19 Clause B of direction by the Speaker is also followed here. Budget to Lok Sabha is always in two parts. One is railways and the other is the general budget. The budgetary procedure. There are four different operations in the budgetary procedure. The first one is preparation of the budget, then the enactment of the budget, execution of the budget, and finally parliamentary control over the finances of India. The first one, the preparation of the budget, which starts somewhere in the month of August or September. The Ministry of Finance prepares the central budget every year, as already mentioned. What are the factors that play a very, very important role in the preparation of the budget? The macroeconomic targets to be achieved is given importance. The basic fiscal policy strategy statement is also understood. The financial requirements of different projects are estimated, and finally, the medium-term fiscal policy statement is also stated. The budget preparation process. Four things are involved here: estimates of expenditure and revenues, first estimate of deficit, narrowing of deficit, and finally, presentation and approval of the budget. The estimates of expenditure involves various ministries to provide initial estimates of plan and non-plan expenditures. The ministries discuss the plan expenditures with Niti Aayog. Financial advisors of ministries prepare non-plan expenditures. The secretary of every ministry consolidates all these income expenditure statements. The budget estimates are set then for the ensuing fiscal year. Non-plan expenditure is accounted for by in terms of interest payments and subsidies. Estimates of revenue include the expected revenue to flow into the government treasury for that financial year. Revenue receipts are of two types. One is capital and the other is current receipts. Capital receipts include repayment of loans given by the government, receipts from disinvestment of public sector equity. Current receipts include mainly the tax revenues, receipts by way of dividends from public sector units, and interest payments on loans given out by the central government. Tax revenues is estimated on the basis of existing rates of taxation. Inflation rates is also taken into consideration. All the estimates are provided to the Revenue Secretary of India. Under the first estimates of deficit, the following things are taken into consideration. estimates of revenue and expenditure are matched for the first time. It provides the shortfall in revenue, and how to meet the projected expenditure is worked out. Government then starts consulting with the chief economic advisor of the nation, decides on the optimal level of borrowings to meet the deficit. A part of the revenue gap is left unfilled to be met through the issue of ad hoc treasury bills. How does the government narrow the deficit? Now that they know the amount of deficit, how do they do it? The targets for fiscal deficits and the overall budget deficit is decided. The remaining shortfall is filled through revision in tax rates. They also stimulate the growth in different sectors which could bring in more revenue to the nation. Adjustments are also made to the expenditure. Usually, sometimes the plan expenditure is also modified. The non-plan expenditure comprising of the interest payments, subsidies and administrative expenditure are also modified. There is always political sensitivity involved, because to reduce or to narrow deficit, reducing subsidies will be a politically not a viable option. The second stage is the enactment of the budget. All the prepared documents are presented in the Parliament for enactment and legislation according to the Indian Constitution, which stipulates under Article 12 how it has to happen. Parliament in this case is supreme in all financial matters. The budget passes through the following stages. The finance minister presents the budget in the Lok Sabha. A copy of the budget is placed on the Rajya Sabha table. After presentation of the budget, a finance bill is introduced. A finance bill consists of proposals for new taxes, changes to current taxes, and sometimes repeal certain taxes too. Revenue and expenditure proposals are debated in both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Only after it is voted, the government can withdraw money from the Consolidated Fund of India. Third stage is the execution of the budget. Budget execution is the first stage will be to present a finance and appropriation bill in the Parliament, and it is expected to be passed. The executive department is permitted to collect funds and spend on approved projects only after finance and appropriation bill is passed. This becomes the duty of the Ministry of Finance, Revenue Department. The secretary of each ministry becomes the principal accounting authority of each ministry. Accounts of various ministries are also compiled, and the Controller Auditor General of India audits all these compiled accounts. And there are always two committees of Parliament called as the Public Accounts Committee and the Estimates Committee, which keep a constant vigil on the way the ministries spend so that they do not overshoot their budget. The last process is the Parliament control over finance. The finance bill and the appropriation bill, when presented, debated, and it is passed, then the money can be spent by the government of India. The executive of the nation makes requests, receives grants from the Parliament, which is sovereign according to the Indian Constitution with regarding to finances of India. The demands are grants, supplementary grants, additional grants, and any other grants that is required. Lok Sabha has the power to accept these grants that are claimed, or they can reduce or even reject any demand in terms of grants. In the general debate, Lok Sabha receives a request from various other ministries. Though the finance minister introduced all the demands, later formally it is also introduced by the respective ministers of different departments and ministries. In all the process, Rajya Sabha does not have any voting power. So, in the third stage we saw the enactment, which has to be dealt in detail. These are the different stages that happens in the Parliament when the finance minister presents the budget. So, the 4 stages that happens in the parliament: presentation of the budget, general discussion, voting on demands of grants, passing of appropriation bill, and finally passing of financial bill into an act. The first stage is the presentation of the budget. The first reading is called as the presentation of the budget, which is called as the budget speech by the finance minister. In the speech, it will include the economic survey report, economic classification of budget, annual reports of different ministries, an explanatory memorandum on the budget, an appropriation bill, and finally a finance bill with taxation proposals. The general budget is always presented in the Lok Sabha. After the budget speech only, it is laid in the Rajya Sabha. There is no discussion on the day when budget is presented to the Lok Sabha and to the Rajya Sabha. The budget papers are always available to the MPs after finance minister's speech is over. General discussion followed by a detailed discussion happens not on the day of the budget speech. Exception is always there. In an election year, the budget may be presented twice, as already mentioned. One is to secure a vote of account for a few months, and later it shall be completed in full. The second stage after presentation is a general discussion. On the day the budget is presented, no discussion is allowed, but from the second day, the general discussion is permitted. The general discussion could last for about 3 to 4 days. They discuss the budget in whole, and any question in terms of principles are raised, but no motion can be moved at this stage by any member of the parliament. Finance minister may or may not reply, but he has the right of reply to any question that are raised by the honorable members of the parliament. Then the two houses are adjourned for about 3 to 4 weeks, and during these 3 to 4 weeks, 24 departmental committees meet. They scrutinize every demand of grants, and after the scrutiny, these committees prepare their reports and submit to the parliament. Committees prepare separate reports for each ministry, and once it comes back or the reports of these standing committees are presented to the parliament, then discussion and voting for grants takes place. The demand for grants could be made ministry wise, voted upon, and then they become executable grants. Lok Sabha only has voting power on the demand for grants, but budget is discussed in both the houses. And with regarding to the expenditure that is charged on the Consolidated Fund of India, no voting happens in both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. The budget is discussed in detail, then motions are moved whether to cut, reduce or remove. That is the stage of the third stage that happens with regarding to demands of grants, where when voting is needed. Voting for demands goes through 3 different types of cut motions. One is the policy cut motion, where the amount could be reduced, reasons for reduction is mentioned, and suggestions are also given. The second is the economy cut motion, where the proposed expenditure on the economy is given a reason to cut or reduce the expenditure. The last one is a token cut motion, which could be in the form of 1 rupee or 100 rupees. This cut motion is only to show or ventilate a specific grievance against this expenditure. The fourth stage is the appropriation bill. An appropriation bill is introduced by the finance minister. Appropriation means to spend money or to get permission to spend money from the Consolidated Fund of India. So, what are the two things? To meet the grants passed by the Lok Sabha and to meet the expenditure charged on the Consolidated Fund of India. No amendment can be proposed to an appropriation bill, and the decision of the Speaker is final. Finally, we come to the passing of the finance bill. The finance bill is introduced, then it is passed in the Lok Sabha, and once it is passed with a majority, it becomes legal income side in terms of the budget. No opposition to the introduction of the bill or specifically the finance bill. According to the Provisional Collection of Taxes Act 1931, Parliament and the President will have to complete the entire process of budget within 75 days. Once the finance bill is passed by the Lok Sabha, it becomes the Finance Act. That completes the process of budget, which means the enactment of budget has happened. The presidential assent, according to Article 111, completes the process of budget, and both appropriation bill and the finance bill, once receives the presidential assent, becomes the act. So enactment of the budget is nothing but converting the two bills of appropriation bill and the financial bills into act by passing in the Lok Sabha and President giving his assent. We move to the final part of the budget. We apprise it. Budget is not like the government can tax, borrow, spend money as it likes. Every country's resources are limited, hence there is an importance with good budgeting. How to distribute precious resources to diverse governmental operations. Prudent expenditure is important or vital for a government's stability. Good profits are prerequisite for prudent spending, and that means healthy public finance. Process of budget preparation is not open to citizens. That is a negative factor. Decentralization, budget making process remains a secret bureaucratic exercise. It is an esoteric language, and the presentation style of the budget public does not understand. Budgeting exercise in India remains mainly the domain of bureaucrats. This picture also talks about the difficulties with regarding to understanding the budget. At the formulation stage, citizens are never consulted. At the enactment stage, qualitative debate does not take place. At the implementation stage also, there is not much of a community monitoring system available, and in terms of auditing, there is not much of a feedback. How do we move forward? More role is needed with regarding to non-governmental actors. New public finance practices and transparency is expected. Formal mechanism where citizens could participate in budgeting process could be enhanced. A participatory system and a pre-budget consultation is expected. Inputs from civil society, media, academics and political activities could also enhance the quality of budget, because that will show us whether a budget is towards pro-poor or what. Finally, conclusion, budget documents are not just numbers. It is fascinating. The main intention of the government is understood through a budget. A government's priority, a government's policy is understood through a budget. Different regions, sectors and industries which create a sea change in the lives of people. Budget numbers express enormous volume of information. Budget analysis can discover government's expressed as well as hidden priorities, whether they are focused on rural development, elementary education to children, or drinking water facilities or health services. Just to check yourself or to recollect who prepares the budget in India, who presents the budget in Parliament, discuss the constitutional provisions for budget in India, the different stages of budget preparation, highlight the different cut motions in Lok Sabha, and why is budget important for any country. Thank you.